Curtis, let's play.
That corner's off, man. Back.
Come on, Curtis, let's play.
That corner's off, man.
Hello, Frog fans. Welcome to Postgame Beers podcast. I am your host tonight, Kyle Malloy at YellMK on Twitter, joined by my co-host, the master of activities, Jacob Sailors at JD Sailors. We have a full crew tonight. We've got our producer, Crazy Rick Cartwright, the horse, Garrett Evans, and our Sultan of Staten, Martin Guerrero. We're all here, the entire Lupton Drinking Club. Opening day is now, we're now in the hours countdown stage. We've got about 70 hours or so to go. We've broken down the pitchers for you guys. We've broken down the offensive lineup. Even had Coach Sarlos on yesterday when he broke some news releasing the weekend rotation. Immediately after that podcast, our close friend from D1, Kendall Rogers, reached out. He demanded to actually get back on the show and refute Kirk. And so that's why we've invited him on tonight. Thanks for coming back on, Kendall. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's funny you mentioned that. So, I was talking to like a scout and he goes, "Oh, I don't know if you've heard." And I hadn't seen your podcast yet. He's like, "I don't know if you had heard that, Tully's going to start opening day." I said, "Oh, that's pretty interesting." So I text Lois. I'm like, "Hey, is this true?" "Oh, yeah, it's true." So I'm thinking like, "Oh man, I'm right on top of it, dude. I got a great scoop here." About 10 minutes later, like, "Hey, dude, like Kirk just literally broke that on the Drinking Club podcast." So yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's good.
Okay,
it's good.
Kendall,
It was funny because, we know, like, we cover one team, right? You cover 100 teams. But it was funny to us because we sent this tweet out at like 11 a.m., right? So, when it came out at 8 p.m., we're like, what? Like, what just happened here?
And Kendall, what you just described, that scenario, is exactly what I told those guys happened.
Yeah.
That was my guess.
You should have seen MK's text in the group chat.
I'm sure he was getting mad. He strikes me as the type that gets extremely mad.
Oh my goodness.
Well, Kendall, whatever we can do to help you and give you scoops, we're glad.
Yeah. Next time he breaks news like that on your show, you might let me know, please.
Yeah.
Turn your notifications on for Lupton Drinking Club.
That's risky, dude.
So I have an honest
I don't
question
need a beer count from Lupton at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night or something while I'm at another game.
I'm also guessing you don't check your DMs very often. Is that accurate?
Right now, let's see. So right now I've got 47 missed DMs.
Okay.
One of them's probably yours.
Okay. So that makes me feel better because I think I sent it
to you.
Oh,
I see you guys. Okay. I can make it happen. I can get you guys to see the war numbers.
Oh, we're going way back. All right.
I see your tweet from last Thursday.
Yeah,
I
had to remember what he was talking about. But MK DM'd you directly with the scoop. You could have had it by lunch.
Yeah, my bad.
Well, next time I'll just text you. I try not to
That's
bother
my
you.
own bad. Seriously, just text me.
All right.
I'm a lot more likely to actually read it.
Well, can we start there, Kendall? What do you think about Tully going on Friday? Like, did you hear Kirk's full logic?
Yeah, you know what? I did hear a little bit of it. It's really interesting because, when I talked to Los back in the fall, it was kind of like, one of those things where he was like, well, I'm kind of toying with the idea of him or a belt in the weekend rotation. Whoever doesn't, get in the weekend rotation will close for us. And at the time, I was thinking, okay, well, it sounds to me like either a belt's going to be the Sunday guy or Tully's going to be the Sunday guy, and no in between. And the fact that he is the Friday guy over such an accomplished pitcher like Cole Klecker, who got this team to Omaha last year, is really impressive. Now, that's not saying that he's better than Klecker or anything like that, but just the fact that they think that Tully has been good enough to be in that role to start the season is very telling, and it really is a good sign for this team because Tully is a lefty, low 90s with his fastball, pretty good breaking ball, but clearly. When you look at his numbers and you look at kind of his stuff in the past before he got to TCU, clearly the stuff has ticked up. And that seems to kind of be a recurring theme with his team, guys. I mean, you think about Tully, Zach Morris. I'm like amazed to see him in the Sunday role. I mean, this is a guy that, I mean, let's face it, he was kind of a punching bag at Arkansas last year, and to
Mostly by us.
Exactly. I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, I don't know. What's his ERA against TCU? Like 400?
Oh, gosh. We talked about that. It's got to be double digits for sure. Easily.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at a guy like that who has kind of reinvented himself in the purple and white, and, the change-up's been a really good pitch for him. The fastball's ticking up. What I'm seeing is across the board, guys on the mound are getting significantly better. And that also kind of leads me to this is like, what will we see out of Cole Klecker this season? All these guys are taking a step forward.
Right.
Now you kind of think Klecker is also going to take a step forward. So it'd be very interesting to see what the whole kind of makeup of this team looks like.
Do you ever get concerned with guys who have low strikeout per 9 numbers? That they might have a successful season and then maybe that catches up to them? Does that ever cross your mind when you're evaluating pitchers?
Not in college baseball, it doesn't.
Okay.
I think if you look in college baseball, the number of, arms of guys that are pitchability, pitchers, the rate of success at the collegiate level is actually pretty high, as long as you can command the zone. That I've said that all along. If you look at college baseball, and yeah, guys are throwing a heck of a lot harder these days, but if you can play defense and you can throw strikes and give your defense a chance, you're going to have chances are you're going to have pretty good numbers, unless you're just throwing absolute beach balls up there, which most guys that are going to TCU aren't doing that. So it helps to be able to get a lot of swing and miss, but I don't think it's like a death knell or anything if you can't.
Okay.
Where I think this helps TCU out, with Zach Morris taking over that Sunday role, is now you have an established starter for midweeks. That's something TCU hasn't had the last 3 years, really. It's been, let's try a freshman here. Let's try a freshman. And they've lost a lot of those midweek games that have cost them, potential hosting.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think if you look at the staff as a whole, one of the things I really liked about it in the fall, what was the sheer depth? I mean, I think back to, guys like, Mosiello, who, he may not be a weekend guy for the team, but what he is kind of just a hard-nosed, pitcher who's going to throw strikes. He's going to be in the low 90s. He's going to have a pretty solid slider. I think if you look at the rest of this pitching staff as a whole, if you can have a guy like Ben Hampton as your Tuesday guy, like that, you're in a pretty good spot. I mean, because you're talking about a kid who has thrown 400 to 500 innings in his collegiate career, has actually had a great season in the Big 12 before. And, if he is your midweek guy, you're in a really good spot. So, yeah, I'm not saying TCU is a team without question marks. I think everyone has question marks. But I love this team on paper. I think this team will be very good.
Can we talk about the question marks? Because I feel like we've been kind of overwhelmingly positive in our previews. Just being fans, we're optimistic. But I think there's a lot of truth to that, too, given the depth and talent. But let's talk about some question marks. What comes to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing there'd be two things for me, right? I think if you look at the pitching staff, as good as I feel about it, I think a lot hinges on Tolley and Zach Morris. To a greater degree, Zach Morris, as good as he was in the fall, there's still an aspect of me that is very skeptical that's going to carry over to the spring. I don't think that's going to be the case, but if Zach Morris came out and scuffled in the spring, would I take a step back and go, man, that's really shocking? Probably not. But that, so that's one thing for me is I kind of want to. It's one of those. I want to see, I'll believe it when I see it kind of things. That's not a disrespect, but when you're a guy coming off a year with like a 7+ ERA, it's natural to, be in prove-it mode. I think the other thing for me, when I look at this team as a whole, is, obviously you lost one of the premier players in TCU history in Braden Taylor, one of my all-time favorites, not only at TCU, but just in terms of covering college baseball players. I think if you looked at the end of last year, Cole Fontenelle, I thought was playing his best baseball in a TCU uniform at the very end of last year. So, losing those two guys is big. And I think it's going to be imperative that, you get the young guys like Chase Brunson and Sam Myers. I know Ryder Robertson is a guy that, I want to say he was banged up coming out of high school. I don't think he was banged up at TCU in the fall, but I think he was banged up coming out of high school. And so he was a little bit slow, moving out of the gates in the fall. I mean, those are three really high impact freshmen that, frankly, they're going to need them to be high impact. That doesn't mean that they need Chase Brunson to go out there and hit 360 with 10 home runs. But what they need is all three of those guys to be, pretty productive, to kind of take the pressure off the Anthony Silvas, the Carson Bowens, and the Curtis Burns and guys like that.
So I want to go back to pitching for a second, Kendall. Jacob mentioned the D1 like top 100 prospects in the Big 12, right? Which I realize you don't have that list memorized, but we had a hard time. He said, "Hey, who's the third guy?"
This was the top 200 prospects in all of college baseball.
Oh, all of college baseball. Okay,
Yes.
all right. So and we had a hard time coming up with a third TCU player. It ended up being Zach Collier, right-hander pitcher from McLennan College, so a transfer in. And none of us have ever seen him, right? We know he's big. He's got a 96-mile-an-hour fastball, but like we didn't know that. How do you? I don't know if you want to talk about Zach specifically, but how do you guys come up with these lists? I mean, this is crazy.
Well, I got to give all the credit in the world to David Seifert, a prospect writer. He literally spends about 3 or 4 weeks kind of crafting these lists, talking to coaches, talking to scouts. And he essentially what he does, he comes up with about 260 names. And I'll be very honest, he has not had a prospect list or at least a group of names where I looked at it and went, hey, you're missing this guy. Like, you're missing this really legit dude. That just doesn't happen with him. So I got to give him all the credit. But I think the biggest thing for us, and it took me a while as a writer / evaluator. Trust me, it takes a long time. But like there is just a certain like look that you see in a player or a pitcher, and you go, you know what, like he's a big time prospect, or you know what, he's not really a prospect. And so a lot of it's just kind of off of experience and knowing what a prospect kind of looks like. And also projecting a little bit. And there's also some guys out there that I do feel like, you look at and they may not be like a great prospect, but you really like them and you think, you know what, if I'm a pro team, this is something I like to do. I like to look at it as like, if I'm a pro team, would I draft this guy? And in TCU's case, a prime example for me is Cole Klecker. Cole Klecker, if you graded him out, like he's not a premier prospect. I mean, he's a right-hander. He's going to be the, low 90s sinker baller, decent breaking stuff, hard-nosed kid. But I'll tell you what, a guy like him who pounds his own, can get swings and misses, has a stellar reputation as a college baseball pitcher in a major conference. It doesn't matter what you grade him out as a prospect, he's going to get drafted at a pretty high level because of his accomplishments. So there is an element of, hey, do the tools look like a big time prospect? And also, like, what have they accomplished? Because there are kids out there that I see all the time that, if they're in the Big 12 and let's say they hit 270 last year and they've got some decent tools, and they go out there in the spring and they hit 360 and they still have the same decent tools, all of a sudden they went from a 12th rounder to a top 3 rounder. So production can matter in those instances.
Back to Zach Morris for a second. With him taking over that Sunday role, doesn't that kind of speak to Kirk's ability to develop off-speed pitching? That he had such a really good fall after a disastrous year last year at Arkansas?
Yeah, I mean that does factor in. I think anybody would say that Kirk does a great job with those aspects, but yeah, I think the biggest thing I thought was really interesting to me, guys, kind of going back to the fall and talking to Kirk is, he said he basically pulled him aside. He was like, hey, dude, like, have you, like, I want to say he was throwing a split finger maybe. And he said he pulled him aside. I was like, hey, dude, like, have you ever thrown a changeup?
Yeah.
Like, you're not actually throwing like a regular changeup. And I guess he hadn't done that in Arkansas. And so all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's try it out. And he said, like, the first changeup he saw was like, wow, like, holy crap, like this is really good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's just another example of just, Kirk just being an A+ pitching coach. And, what's really interesting to me too is like, what does he do with some of these other guys? I mentioned Mosiello earlier, but like Cademan Parker, he's healthy. He's got a big arm. I think he was up to like 94, 95 against Texas State. Like, obviously his stuff has needed to tick up a little bit. just across the board. But like, does he have a big time breakout season for TCU? So as accomplished as some of these arms are, and and Zach Morris being kind of a last hurrah breakout candidate, man, I could go down the list of kids here that I feel like could easily, take a big step forward this spring.
We actually asked Coach Dave Lawn, the new pitching coach for TCU, who he was. I actually didn't expect him to give us an honest answer, but I said, "Who are you looking at? Who are you excited about?" And he mentioned Braden Sloan, and he mentioned Chase Hoover as his pick to click, which obviously we're hoping for good things this year, but I don't think those are two names at the top of our list.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The other guy I would throw in the mix too is Louis Rodriguez. I loved him in the fall. I don't know if I think you guys were out there the night that.
Yeah, we were bugging you.
It was about 48 degrees and misting, but I thought his stuff that night really played up. He's not a guy that's going to just, rock your world from a velo standpoint, but I want to say he was up to like 92 that night, and the slider was filthy. And again, he's another guy. Zach Collier, I didn't see him in the fall. But, Kirk, really raved about his potential back during the fall as well. And then Kyle Ayers, he's down the list for TCU right now. But, I did not see this velocity the day I was in Fort Worth. But, when I saw him last fall at Houston, he was up to 96. So at least, you at least know it's in the tank. And then, you got other guys like Blake Rogers, who is the Baylor kickback, who, again,
breaking news, Kendall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Blake is injured for the season, unfortunately.
Oh, he did he got hurt. Okay.
Yeah.
How far does that drop us in the rankings?
Not at all.
Poor Blake.
Sorry to cut in.
No, I'm glad.
That was a fire point we're about to have.
Did I miss another tweet like a month ago?
That was during the podcast. You should have watched us live with Kurt.
Yeah, Kendall broke that news yesterday.
I'll go tweet it out when we get off here and say that
there you go.
Rogers is out for the year.
Speaking of Louis, he was a starter for us. When you had Vander High and Cam Brown not really step up to their expectations, and Kirk said after the College World Series that he could have played, but they were worried about his long-term health. Right? So
we would have won the Natty.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But that was a huge loss. That was a huge. He was a starting pitcher, and now it's interesting to have these guys come in and. It's not that he lost his job necessarily, but he's obviously a huge component. He could be starting in a couple weeks. Yeah,
no doubt, man. I just loved his makeup. Him and Mosiello both. That particular night, I thought just pitched with authority. They pitched like they wanted to take your lunch money that night. So I always love guys like that just, they come right at you and they're ready to fight.
It was kind of hard to evaluate TCU pitching during the fall because they were just, it was every hit was a bomb. It was either a home run or just a line drive double.
Yeah, that was I'm trying to think back to that particular scrimmage. I don't have the notes in front of me, but I remember that night, Sam Myers is a really nice player. We talk so much about Chase Brunson. He's a Big 12, preseason Big 12 freshman of the year by us. But, I wouldn't be shocked if Sam Myers is in that discussion too. I loved his approach offensively. I loved his tenacity. I thought he made consistent, hard contact. I'm a big fan of his. And what's really interesting is there's people around the program who think that Ryder Robinson has the most potential out of any of these guys.
Yes. That one guy around the program is called Martin Guerrero.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, the other kid too, and, TCU didn't really put him in a prominent role. And he may not have a prominent role this year, but Micah Kendrick out of Rockwall, he was another freshman I really liked the night I saw TCU. And so, yeah, it's going to be very fascinating. I'm trying to think back. Oh, that was the night that Brody Green looked like the great Bambino out there.
Hey, so I have a question about you going into these, watching fall practices or even spring stuff. When a food critic walks into a restaurant, they're not going to give them like a regular meal. They're going to give them their best. So do you notice any coaches that are trying to impress you or other guys that are writing and doing this?
Great question.
Or do they maybe step back and say, actually, we don't want them to see Brody Green, because he's so good. We want to keep that a secret.
What's really interesting is when I go places, I'll typically, I'll be honest. Like, I'll typically reach out to Kirk or, Schloss, Jay Johnson, all these different coaches. And what I'll kind of say is like, hey, what day is, Peyton Tolley going to pitch? Or, what day is, Paul Skeen's going to pitch? And typically they'll try to work it out where they're pitching the day that I go. But no, it's not one of those things where they sit there and throw all their best guys because I show up. I don't think that highly of myself to expect that kind of treatment. But yeah, I mean, if I reach out to them and say, hey, I'll be there on, Friday, the, 10th of November. Yeah, they'll throw a guy I want to see.
Speaking of fall reports, I noticed you didn't do one for Baylor. Found that interesting.
Well,
canceled their program, huh?
Do they have a program?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, to kind of get me off the hook here, there were a few programs that we didn't get to that I would have liked to. DBU is a program that we didn't get to. I think they're going to be really freaking good. They've got an excellent Friday night guy. They're going to have a loaded offensive lineup. So, that's not a determining factor on like whether a team's going to be good. But I will say this: Baylor could have a really difficult season. I know that saddens you guys, but you just
breaks my heart.
Yeah, I just think Mitch Thompson's in a tough spot, man. That's a tough job. If you look at the landscape of baseball in the state of Texas, you've got Texas Tech, you've got TCU up the road, that right now across the board has a better profile by like a wide margin. You've got Texas going to the SEC to your south, and you've got A&M in the SEC to your south. And oh, by the way, you've got U of H in the Big 12. So the problem is if you're Baylor, like, and I'm not meaning it's disrespectful to BU, but like if you're a recruit right now, like why are you going to Baylor?
That's
you know what I mean? Like, trust me.
To
like,
develop for a year to come to TCU.
Yeah.
Well,
be the next Trey Richardson.
It's an honest discussion point. Like, I'm not trying to. And I know.
No, I know.
Like, please don't cut that up as like a deal.
No, we
bashing TCU or bashing Baylor.
Gonna.
But like in reality, like if you're Mitch Thompson or Zach Dillon, the recruiting coordinator, which I think Zach's really good. Like, what is your pitch?
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, it's not like they had no success. Choice. It's not they have no success. They went to the, let's see, I'm looking it up, NCAA tournament. I'm just talking about recently. All right, so 2017, 2018, 2019, they got to regionals. Their last College World Series was 2005, which yes, that's almost 20 years ago. But they have the potential to do that. They won their regional in 2012. I mean, I don't know.
Let me ask you this, because this is something I wanted to ask you. Now's a good time to do it. So I'm not saying Baylor in particular, but there are programs that are making a concerted effort to invest in NIL, and then others that aren't, and maybe spreading that money to football or basketball. Are you starting to see where maybe some programs are falling off because of NIL? Maybe Baylor's one of them.
Yeah, that could certainly be a part of it. I do know there are programs around the country right now that, their NIL programs in baseball are around $1 million. And I can promise you that Baylor, I know Baylor's not spending that on baseball, because you would see some pickups in the transfer portal that would, lead to you believing that. So I think the problem for Baylor is, I think if you're their donors, and I get it, right? Like it's somebody else's money, but if you're their donors, I think they're kind of looking at Mitch and going, hey, let's see some sort of improvement. And you know what? I'll help you out. So I think they just have to show some improvement. And the problem is they could be better this year in that league, and it may not even matter. Because I think Kansas is going to be good. I think Kansas State's going to be very good. Oklahoma, keep an eye on those guys. They're flying under the radar a little bit, but I think they're particularly loaded offensively. Oklahoma State's going to be Oklahoma State. They're going to knock the cover out the baseball and have a staff ERA of 5. But they're going to be good. They're going to be dangerous. So the problem is, if you look at Baylor, like, who in the hell are you jumping?
Yeah,
like, okay, you might be better in Cincinnati or UCF, but outside of that, who are you overtaking? It's kind of the same. I would say it's the Big 12 is so good now in baseball. It is kind of the same as like the bottom of the SEC. Like, if somebody's going to take a step forward, then somebody good is going to have to take a step back. And I just don't see a team in that league right now that is preparing to take a step back.
It was a nice transition to the top 25. You mentioned a couple teams that are in there. So for the Big 12, we've obviously got TCU, Texas Tech, and Kansas State. Without going into maybe the rotation or something. Why Texas Tech and Kansas State over Oklahoma State, who seems to be a perennial Big 12 contender?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think for me, I think Oklahoma State has a lot of question marks on the mound. I mean, they were average on the mound last year, and they had like a top three round pick, and their Friday night guy. And so, I think when you look at Texas Tech overall, I think they're going to be much, much better. I think if you look at their offensive lineup, getting having Gage Harrelson back, Cade McGee, the Gonzaga transfer, I think is going to be a really nice hitter for them. He's going to focus exclusively on the hitting side. He was a two-way guy at Gonzaga. Tracer Lopez up the middle is a really nice player. Then you have the two kind of the Bash brothers and Kevin Bazell and Gavin Cash. When that's kind of your nucleus of your offense, you're in a really good spot. But I think the biggest thing for me when I look at Texas Tech is what they have beyond the offense. I think if you look at their pitching staff, I think Matt Gardner actually has a pretty deep pitching staff this year. It may not have, you may not have an accomplished guy like a Collector at the front end of the rotation, but, Kyle Robinson, their Friday guy, he's a huge arm up to like 96, 97. He's got a ton of upside. Needs to be more consistent, but has a ton of upside. Zane Petty, the sophomore righty, is a really nice pitcher as well. Again, a velocity guy. Trenton Parrish is back from injury. And then they're ultra excited about a kid by the name of Mac Hewer out of Georgia. 4 pitches for strikes. Again, fastball up to 94, 95. Then they've got some older guys at the back end of the bullpen. So whereas I feel like Texas Tech's kind of, especially the last few years, has been one of those teams where, if you can, like, there's a big drop-off on like a Sunday with their pitching, and then their bullpen just has like 2 guys that you're like, oh, I'm kind of scared of him. I feel like they've got 4 or 5 arms in the bullpen alone that when they come out, you can go, okay, this is a real dude right here. And that's kind of a deviation from the norm for those guys. So I think Texas Tech's going to be pretty good. And Kansas State was the other one you mentioned?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I really like what Pete has with his team. I always kind of like the clubs that play with a chip on their shoulder. And I think if you look at last year, with them kind of getting screwed with Oklahoma getting in, I thought they should have easily gotten it over Oklahoma. I always like those teams that are playing with a chip on their shoulder. And I just think Kansas State is going to be just like wear them out, roll around the dirt, punching people kind of team. I think they're going to be ready to throw some bows. And I think that matters. I really do. And I think when you combine that with, getting electric players like Brady Day, Kalen Culpepper, I think is going to have a monster year. Chuck Ingram, was Tully's teammate last year, Wichita State. He's going to be an outfielder for them, a really talented senior, big-time power, will hit for a pretty high average. I just really like their offensive lineup. David Bishop, the former TCU player, is back for them as well. The only thing for me with Kansas State that I am concerned about, and this is why we kind of went back and forth with Texas Tech and KSU, is the pitching staff outside of Owen Barema.
Is that important, pitching?
Yeah, it's a little important when you have like one weekend starter that I trust. So, yeah, I just think outside of Barema, they have holes, and how they fill those holes between now and conference play. Non-conference is important, but the big thing, especially in a league like this, that's going to have a premier RPI is, having that rotation kind of set and consistent going into league play.
That non-conference, that non-conference was what hurt them last year, though. That's why they quote unquote screwed behind Oklahoma, is because they played, Kansas Wheat Technical or something, on Tuesdays. And never
yeah. So that's a great segue into this conversation. So that's one thing that Pete Hughes, he heeded the committee's advice on that. He certainly did not agree with the committee last year. But if you look at their schedule now, they're, granted this right here is, neutral site, but the Cal, BC, they go to Arizona State for a midweek. They go to Tennessee and Clemson back-to-back days in the middle of the week. That right there tells you how serious they are. They go, they play Nebraska. They're at Missouri State, Wichita State. And then I want to say they have like a late season game on the road. Oh, they go to Northeastern, who, by the way, was at the bottom.
Oh, top 25 Northeastern.
Yeah, they're right at the bottom. They're going to be a good team. So they're at UConn. So, that's right there. That's what, like 5 postseason teams that they're going on the road to face. It's very clear Pete got the hint on that one.
He actually went the opposite end of the spectrum and was like, "All right, we're hitting everybody." Clemson,
Yeah, let's
Tennessee,
go
back
play.
to back.
Hey, I'm not a schedule maker, but I would not advise going to Tennessee and driving to play Clemson the next day. That's just my thought.
Well, Texas Tech kind of did the same thing with their schedule. They have a stretch where they go from Fort Worth to Fayetteville.
Yeah, good luck.
And then I do have a question about Oklahoma State. What have you heard about their Friday night guy, Brian Holiday, the JUCO transfer from Florida?
Yeah, well, I found out that his name is spelled with an I and not a Y.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good.
Yeah, I saw Brian tonight actually. So he's definitely not on that team. But
well, that would be really interesting if he came back and pitched for Oklahoma State.
He could probably do it.
He's not related to the head coach either. He's not one of the super family members.
His son is not. His son's not old enough to reach eligibility. So
all I know is his home run against Texas is still going. it has not landed. Chance Reference still having nightmares over that.
Hey, we're gonna take a quick break. Okay. Kendall, I'm gonna shout out our sponsor here. You can see it on the screen, but we've got what we call Hell's Half Acre. So Hell's Half Acre is stadium goods. They are huge for us. And there we go. Thanks, Jacob. On the screen there, I don't know if you can see that on the left, but that is a Carson Bowen shirt. Part of the proceeds go directly to supporting our baseball team. So then that just doesn't include the T-shirt there, but also the hats and the pullovers. And I'm wearing a pullover myself. Just got a brand new hat as well.
I got one of the hats.
Yeah, so. Awesome stuff. Kendall, if you need any gear, you let us know, and we'll send you something real special.
You'll have to order my Carson Bowen T-shirt.
Yeah, we got to hook that up.
If you wear that to Lupton, you'll be a legend. So.
Well, it's one of those things where, like, I had Braden Taylor as like my man crush at TCU, and now it's Carson Bowen.
No doubt.
He's
on your fantasy team.
Yeah, right. So tell us about your fantasy draft.
Steal of the draft right there.
Yeah. So speaking of Bowen, we had him 19th today in our top 100 college prospect list for the 2025 draft. So, and I think 19 might even end up being low by the time that we get.
But he's not even top 10 catcher in the nation right now.
Don't start with me.
Hey, Kendall, I saw your fantasy draft. You drafted Carson. Did you think he was good value where you guys had him ranked?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with him that I really like is, I say it's unique because there aren't a lot of catchers in college baseball I feel are elite at both defensively and offensively. And I think he's one of those guys that, like, if you look at his power numbers last year, you don't look at him and go like, wow, that's incredible. But I think he's a guy that is going to hit for the same average, but hit for a lot more power. By the way, assuming he's healthy, I know he had the little shoulder issue during the break, but assuming he's healthy and is behind the plate, he's going to be a premier defender. So I think the big thing with Bowen is he checks all the boxes tools wise. And man, I'm always really high on a guy like him who, as a true freshman, he plays like he's a junior or senior. That just says a lot about his mental makeup as well.
What about Chase Brunson? He was a guy that, he came to campus late. He was a LMU commit, not highly recruited. Was he on your radar at all, or did he pop up on your screen at the same time as the rest of us?
About the same time as the rest of us, because, I don't try to cover high school recruiting, but I try to follow it a little bit. And I had heard his name a little bit, but when I talked to Kirk early in the fall, and he's like, "Oh, like this kid's gonna be really good." Anytime those guys, any of these coaches, especially this staff, I feel like the TCU staff's very like by the book. Like if they think a dude stinks, they're gonna tell you a dude stinks. They may tell you not to print it, but they may tell you a dude stinks. And they've been really high on him since day one. They think he can be a fire starter for this offense. He can kind of wreak havoc on the bases. He's got a little bit of pop. They like his consistency in the box. Again, he's a guy that checks a lot of boxes, and their hit rate on guys are high on like that is pretty good.
Back to your fantasy draft, I'm looking at shortstops, and I don't see one Anthony Silva nowhere to be found on any one of these teams.
I was going to draft Silva. Who did I take as my shortstop? I don't have it pulled up right now.
Dang, I can't. I looked at it today. Forgot. Well, it wasn't Anthony Silva, right?
It was not Anthony
I
Silva.
thought I took Silva.
No, you took Carson, and then somebody else took Abelt, and that's all from TCU.
Well, that's blasphemy.
I know, right? Oh, on that, Kendall, I saw your tweet about it. Hey, everybody, look at our fantasy draft. And, there's like 60 comments, and every single one of them is, what about this guy? What about that guy? Pretty predictable.
Yeah, how do you not have any Longhorns on there?
Yeah, I can't wait for the first weekend of games to come and go. And then you guys send out a new ranking, and it's like, how is LSU still ranked? They lost a game on Sunday. That's my favorite part of y'all's Twitter.
Well, you know what? I will never tell Jay Johnson this, but I'm kind of secretly hoping they lose one game in opening weekend so I can get the one fan who will say that he needs to be fired.
Nice. So that was actually one of my questions. Who'd you get the most flack from leaving out of the top 25?
Auburn.
Auburn fans. Yeah, you know what? They're I wouldn't say they're a weird group. I'm an A&M grad, so I can't call anybody weird. But I think when you look at Auburn, it's a very interesting fan base in the sense that like they care about baseball, but when you like challenge them, they act like or like you debate them, then they pull baseball is not a big sport card. It's a very strange dynamic of
it's very Kansas State like.
That's exactly.
They'll come after you, but when you spit those facts at them, you cover baseball, it ain't football. So it's a very interesting dynamic that way. But yeah, Auburn's gonna be pretty good. I think Butch Thompson's an amazing coach, and it would not shock me to see them in the top 25. I think Oklahoma, they don't have enough fans that care, but I think they're a team that we could look at the end of the year and we made a bad decision to not even have them in the discussion. I think they're going to be pretty good.
You think they're a team outside of the top 25 that has the best chance of like making Omaha?
Yeah, they're actually I did actually pick them as my outside the top 25 sleeper. So yeah, I think Oklahoma's going to be very good.
Kendall, looking at the fantasy draft, it looks like one Mr. Ben Abelt was taken off the board for $47. Do you think he is going to be able to keep up his production this year, or do you think we might actually be able to see him play on weekends at all in the starting role?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for him to be a starter, he's going to have to just really refine his overall stuff. I just think, last year he had the breaking ball and the fastball. They were pretty solid pitches, but I don't know about you guys, but I felt like when you watch him pitch, you're kind of like, wait, like how is he this good? Because the stuff doesn't really overwhelm you. So I think for him to be a weekend starter, he's probably going to need to add another pitch, another pitch to keep guys off the other two pitches. And so I think TCU personally really likes him at the back end. It's kind of the whole if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And he does a really nice job back there, and I think they'll stick with it unless somebody in that weekend rotation gives them a reason to pull somebody out. I think what will probably happen at this point is if somebody struggles in the weekend, I bet they'll just slide Ben Hampton into there.
Yeah, apparently over the fall he added a changeup to his repertoire.
See, there you go. Maybe that gives him a chance.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the if it's not broke, don't fix it. I think just we have so many experienced starters that can start on the weekend and have started on the weekend that I think the most important role for him this year would be to finish those games. And then I think next year I think they'll take a good look at actually putting him in the rotation.
Yeah, it's just one of those things like they don't necessarily have to do that right now. So,
right.
Why do that? And especially if you don't have to throw somebody into a heater of a role right off the bat.
Yeah, someone in the comments brings up Schloss's coaching tree, and I do have a question, about Randy Mazey. It's being his last year. Do you think that kind of motivates West Virginia a little bit more?
Yeah, they're an interesting club. I had them making the postseason. I think, I don't bet against Randy. I think he's a really good coach. I think, those guys, Steve Sabbins and those guys do a really nice job. Obviously, they have J.J. Weatherholt. But I think for West Virginia to have the type of year that they need, to make the postseason, Grant Hussey, really like him over at first base. He's a big-time power hitter. He needs to cut down on the strikeouts. If you look at his numbers, he swings and misses a lot, but I think he's a guy that could have a huge year. I think the big key for me, is Aiden Major on the front of that rotation. I think he's a big-time arm. He's up to like 95, 96, but he hasn't always been the most consistent. But he's the guy I would circle. If he has a big year, I think the rest of that team kind of follows suit.
Kendall, what are your thoughts just in general about sophomore slumps? Because I have that flagged as one of TCU's concerns, but what is your overall, broad perspective on sophomore slump?
Yeah, I mean, dude, it can happen, but I've seen a heck of a lot more guys take a step forward as a sophomore than I have have a big slump as a sophomore. So, I mean, it happens, but I would say that the chances of them doing the opposite of that are probably a lot better. I don't have a lot of analysis on that. I'm not I'm just not like a superstition guy. Like, our sophomore slump. Like, I don't know. I'm never worried about that kind of stuff.
I'm just struggling so hard to find problems with this TCU team. So that's
if we're gonna try to find problems, right? I mean, the most glaring thing for me would be replacing Braden Taylor. You're replacing Braden with Ryder Robinson more than likely over at third base if he's healthy. Like, I think that's who they would like to have at third base. So, I mean, you go from Braden Taylor to a true freshman. It's a big change. So
what about the idea of not replacing Braden Taylor, but getting a little bit better in a lot of different areas, including, pitching, and then bringing in Tolley and just, depth in the position player, whatever you want to call it. Just not saying swap out Braden Taylor for someone equal and replace him, but just make everyone else a little bit better.
Jacob, talking about that, it's kind of like the Moneyball thing. You replace them place them in the aggregate with production around him that kind of fills that void. You're not replacing one guy, but you're trying to get to a certain number, like in Moneyball.
The biggest thing. I think the record and the results. Well, actually, I think they'll have a better record than they had last year. Because let's not forget. We
won't take the first 3 months off.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I saw you guys in San Marcos, and I was like, "Who the hell are these guys?" Like,
Kendall, we were getting called out. We were getting called out on Twitter as a podcast. Like, can't believe we bought y'all's hype.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they turned it on. But I think this is a team that's going to win. It's going to win a lot of games. I think they're probably going to win the Big 12. I don't see any aspect of this club where I'm like, boy, this is a huge concern.
So where does TCU, I know you have them ranked 5th, but as far as just echelons and tiers go, is obviously Wake Forest, they have pitching and they have a lot of strengths, but is TCU compete on that top tier level, or is there just something holding us back a little bit?
No, I think they will compete at the top tier level this year. I think if you look at the teams in the top 10 right now, I think they're all actually very comparable. Oregon State, A&M, TCU, I think they're all very similar. Tennessee. I do think Wake and like LSU and Arkansas are a little bit of a step ahead. But, outside of those top 2 or 3 teams, I think TCU and those clubs are right there. What would be really nice is if TCU and A&M actually played at Globe Life this year.
Well, you have to talk to the coach down south about that. Yeah. You have to go to the Aggie podcast about that.
I asked about that and was told that we only want to see A&M versus TCU in the National Championship Series. Somehow I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, we asked Kirk about that. He said you're asking the wrong coach. That was his quote.
Yeah, Kirk and Schloss for a National Championship Series. The pre-series press conference would be just as entertaining as the series.
So if we can get full disclosure on this, how much does the SEC pay you guys to put 6 teams in the top 10?
So it starts like $1 million, and it's like once we get to 4, it's like every team's $1 million.
I gotcha.
You have to sell those SEC extra subscriptions.
Exactly. See, you guys are catching on.
What is going on with D1? What new stuff do you guys have this year planned? Content that we can expect as subscribers.
Yeah, dude. I'll tell you what. I'm ultra excited. I'm always excited about this time of year, but I'm very excited about this season with what we have. You guys DM me. I never responded, but we're gonna have access to WAR for all fans on our site this year. We're going to have advanced analytics. We're going to have whiff rates on all pitches, thanks to our friends at Synergy Sports. We're going to have pretty much the entire tackle box for a college baseball fan. So I'm excited about that, and just continuing to to cover all the great stories in the sport. This is a sport that, whether it's talking to you guys or talking to Los and TJ and those guys, it's a very unique sport in the sense that pretty much everybody I run into in it, I really like. And I know there's a time that, I really hated TCU, but, I've come around. And so, I'm just fortunate to cover a sport with guys like yourselves.
So, Kendall, I want to change the narrative on that because I've read, I've read a lot of your previews, and I know they're not all yours, right?
Yeah.
But I've read just a ton of these previews, and it seems like y'all love everyone. Like, I was in charge of previewing Houston, and I don't like that squad at all. And you guys are like, man, watch out for Houston. But it's like...
Well, so I'm one of those people. I try to I'm not saying I look for all the good things, but I look at Houston, and I saw Jackson Jelkin, their Friday night guy, the day I was there for fall ball, and I loved him. I think he's a top 2 or 3 rounder. So, I think if you're a team like Houston who has a guy like that on a Friday night, you've got a lot of guys back offensively. You're right in the sense, if you look at their lineup, it's not wow, what an impressive lineup, but it's a lot of guys they have back from last year, and that really matters in college baseball.
I do like Justin Murray. I think he's worth tuning in.
He's a really good two-way player. He was a guy that can't remember if anybody took him in the fantasy draft or not. I was trying to get Cypher to take him, but he's a really good overall player. But that this is a big year. We talked about the Schloss coaching tree earlier, but this is a really big year for Todd. I thought last year, even though they took a step forward, not making the NCAA tournament, going into the Big 12, I thought that he was on the hot seat, and I think he knows he was on the hot seat, right? But they kept him for another year, and I think this is obviously a campaign where he's going to have to win some games and at least be in the tournament discussion to keep that job. So, and I'm very curious to see how he does, because I actually think Todd's a pretty good coach. Just for whatever reason, the last 2 or 3 years just haven't turned out great.
Can we talk about your favorite team, the Texas Longhorns, real quick?
Of course.
Do they go as far as Tanner Witt goes?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like Tanner Witt is actually not even starting this weekend. So
really,
yeah. So if that is the case,
they're not going very far.
Raise the red flag. If there is any team in our top 20 that I think has a chance to be bust, it would be them. I think throwing the weight of the world, really the weight of Austin onto LeBaron Johnson, as much as I liked him at the end of last year, I think is really risky. When you're talking about Charlie Hurley, who not a bad college pitcher, right? We talked about that earlier about guys that can pound the zone. If he's your Saturday guy and Witt's on the shelf, and you have the catching situation they have, they have Rylan Galvan as their catcher, who was really iffy the day I was there in the fall. If that is their situation, they're in trouble. With that said, I do like them offensively. I think Jalen Flores, I think, is going to take a big step forward. I think you look up the middle, keep an eye on Tommy Farmer, the freshman for them, the California product. Man, he is electric. I know y'all don't like the Horns, but you're going to love that guy. He plays with a ton of energy. Kind of gives me Brunson / Myers vibes in that regard. Just a really exciting player. Then Will Gasparino, the son of former Oklahoma State great Billy Gasparino, who's now, I think Billy's still with the Dodger organization. His sons y'all remember Spencer Jones at Vanderbilt? The big, tall power hitter. So he reminds me a lot of him. Spencer ended up being like a first-round pick. But, Will Gasparino, probably 6'4", 6'5", hits for big-time power. Got a sizable hole in the swing. But he has a chance to be pretty good. But, yeah, Texas could have bust. I'll tell you the team, not to pump these guys up too much. I know I don't want to do that on here. But the team in the top 10 that I think could actually be really, really good is your boy Schloss. When I saw them in the fall, they looked very, very, very good.
We're not Schloss haters. We're more Aggie haters, kind of, but we're not Schloss haters.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
so here's my we
Except
can
when
go
he's
down
tweeting about Taylor Swift. Then,
Yeah, come on,
all
man.
gloves are off.
Yeah. Here's my thing about Jim and TCU, and I don't know if we've even talked about this before. My thing is this: like, if you're TCU, like everybody likes Kirk, so if you're a TCU fan, like, where would TCU baseball be had Jim Schlossnagle never been your head coach?
Even better. No, I'm kidding.
We would have won in 2016.
Yeah, exactly.
I really don't. I think the majority, or at least the smarter TCU baseball fans, they do not hate Schloss. I think the way that he left was kind of like
calling some TCU fans dumb.
No, hold on. No one likes to be left out, on the altar, right? So when somebody says, I'm going to take a quote unquote better job or a different job, that doesn't necessarily feel good. But what he did for the program, like you said, we wouldn't have been here and we wouldn't have been in the position to have Kirk. So it worked out for everybody.
Yeah, no, it worked out great. And I will give Jim credit on this. Jim actually has never come out publicly and said it's a better job. He has said that he thinks it's a different job with probably more upside, but he has not said it is like just come out and said, oh, it's easily a better job. I'll give him credit. He hasn't done that.
He was so big on facilities. That was such a big sticking point with him.
Well, so here's what I would tell you. I think Jim Schlossnagle would have ended up either being the Texas A&M head coach or the Texas head coach. Take or pick. Like, that's where he's going to end up, one of those two places. Because I think he had felt like he had probably accomplished very close, which, I mean, getting to Omaha, what was it, 4 times during his tenure?
Yep.
He got there 5 in a row.
It was 10.
Yeah. I mean, he had done what he can do at TCU other than win a national championship. That's a pretty damn good run.
And we should have had one in 2016. We're not over.
Yeah, it was Coastal, yeah.
Yeah.
Coastal had to beat y'all twice.
Yes.
But yeah, they're gonna be really good. I mean, they, probably paid a king's ransom for Braden Montgomery. Lavallette's back for him. The kid, I just talked about Farmer from UT, from California. The Gavin Grahovic kid. I told somebody this the other day. I was actually on the Baton Rouge station. We were talking about freshmen, around the SEC, and the Gavin Grahovic kid. I mean, I saw Dylan Cruz as a freshman, and I was like, instantly like, wow, I love this guy. And the Grahovic kid for them was like that dude when I saw them against U of H. It was like from the first swing, you're like, whoa, I love this guy. And like he put on a show that night. So we'll see. My hope would be that these two programs aren't playing in a super, because that would mean that one of those teams is a 15 or 16 seed or a 14 seed. But I would love to see them play in Omaha, because I think both teams would be really good.
Heck yeah.
Around the nation,
Sure.
real quick, mid-majors have really taken a step forward over the last couple of years. Who are some of the mid-majors that really excite you this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. We talked about Northeastern earlier. Mike Glavin, Tom's brother, has honestly done a tremendous job with that program. They've I would say they've adopted the UConn model to some extent, but that's a tougher job than UConn. But they've done a really nice job there. Mike Sirota, in this day and age when kids are, leaving programs all over the place for NIL money, Mike Sirota, their outfielder, he could have pretty much gone anywhere. Instead, he stuck it out at Northeastern, decided to stay put, and now they have an All-American outfielder that they're going to have for another season. So, he's done a great job. I think I call them mid-majors because there's, I don't call the Big Ten the power conference in baseball. Iowa is going to be a really interesting storyline this year. How they handle, expectations. Brody Breck could very well be the number 2, number 1, number 2, number 3 overall pick in the draft. Up to 100 and 101. How does he handle those expectations? They've got a really nice lineup. They got a really good number 2 starter, Marcus Morgan. But I'm just intrigued to see what they do. I mean, it's not every year that you see a program like Iowa expected to be a Omaha contender, and how they handle that will be fascinating.
Do you think they'll throttle their guys? Do you think it's more important for the program that they retain their draft value, or do you think they'll pitch them into the ground to try to make a run?
No, Rick Keller's like the opposite of that. Like, Rick Keller's almost too careful with guys. If you look at their track record with arms, it's pretty good. I want to say they've got like 4 or 5 arms in the big leagues right now. And granted, they've kind of gone through a couple of pitching coaches, but their pitching coach now, Sean McGrath, is a really good, really good pitching coach. Heralded guy, was a Northeast guy, then went to Elon, and then now is at Iowa. But yeah, I don't think they're going to do that at all. If anything, I think they're going to take extra care of Brick, especially early in the season. And we'll find out a lot about them. I think was it week 2 or 3 that they're in Jacksonville and they'll face off with Auburn and Virginia. That'll be interesting. And then
I think they'll be too careful too, and that's why I like Indiana out of that conference.
Yeah, Indiana's going to hit, man. They're really going to hit. I like Jeff Mercer's team a lot. I've been kind of waiting. Mercer is a really good coach. He did a great job at his previous stop at Wright, and I've been kind of waiting for him to take that big step forward. I think they're finally ready for that. I think the other couple of programs for me is I love the Sun Belt this year. I think obviously Troy and Coastal Carolina, especially Troy, I think they're both going to be really good. And then you look at Texas State and Louisiana and Southern Miss. I mean, that's a hell of a trio. I mean, Southern Miss, JB Middleton, a closer for them, is going to sit 98-100. They've got a bona fide Friday night guy, Nico Mazza. He's going to be a top 3 or 4 round guy when he comes out in the draft. Louisiana has a really talented team, one of my favorite players in the country, and Kyle DeBarge up the middle. Then Texas State, a club that y'all are familiar with. I think TCU played them in the fall, didn't they?
I think we handled them pretty easily in that one.
Yeah, I mean that. I don't know if they had a great fall, but I mean, Chase Moore is obviously a really talented player, and they've got some decent arms, and Trouty certainly does a nice job down there. So I think the Sun Belt. We talk about the Big 12, ACC, Pac-12, SEC, but I think the Sun Belt is going to be 6-7 teams deep this year.
Is Georgia Southern in the Sun Belt as well?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're in the mix. I mean, they've got a lot of question marks in the mound, but yeah, that league is loaded. When Georgia Southern hosted a regional 2 years ago, and right now I think they were picked like 7th in that league. So it kind of gives you an idea how deep that conference is now.
All right, Kendall, before we wrap up, I have one final question for you. So last year, the 5 of us did a competition each week where we pick series around the country, and then we kept record throughout the year. And whoever finished last had to wear a clown suit to the Big 12 championship game. And that guy is the uninformed frog who's sitting quietly in the upper right-hand corner. This year, the loser has to provide butler service at the final home game of TCU season. So can you give the uninformed frog some game-picking advice so he doesn't have to finish last 2 years in a row?
Yeah, everybody else log off.
Do you actually have proof of the clown suit?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We have a whole TikTok, YouTube video.
Okay. Can you DM me one of those pictures so I'll never look at it?
We'll send you the YouTube video.
First of all, I would say do an ounce of research. That usually helps. I mean, just go with the home team. When in doubt, just go with the home team.
That's how I finished first. I picked a lot of home teams.
Speaking of home teams,
or just pick the opposite of everybody else. Sometimes it actually helps you a little bit.
I tried to do that. I tried to do that just for the just to get a little spicy in the last week of the season, and that's in fact how I ended up losing. So thank you, Vanderbilt.
I kind of like the butler service idea.
Yeah.
Tux and all.
Yeah, and maybe the pinstripe mustache.
Yeah, and he has to go get drinks for us and serve them on a tray.
Raleigh fingers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Kendall,
Excuse me,
who's
sir.
your national champion right now? If you had to pick one team to win it all right now, who would it be? And why is it not TCU?
I think it's really hard to repeat. I picked Arkansas. I think this is a year that
Can they
people
catch
are
a
not
pop-up?
gonna do what?
Can they catch a
Exactly. I think
pop-up?
this is a year they'll catch a pop-up. And I also think this is a year where, as strange as it sounds for a number 2 and number 3 team, I think a lot of America thinks that it's going to be Wake or LSU. And I think as weird as it is, as a number 2 and number 3 team in the country, they're actually a little bit under the radar compared to those teams. And I just think I love Hagen Smith. It's not the fact that he grew up about 30 minutes north of where I grew up. That has nothing to do with it. But I think Hagen Smith is really good. I think he could very well be a top 2 or 3 pick in the draft. They're going to be good offensively. And again, they're really deep on the mound. So I like Arkansas. And I don't think they're going to be the best team in the country at the start of the season. But I think by the end of the year, they're going to be very good.
The biggest thing for Arkansas is Trey Richardson graduated.
Yeah. I think speaking of balls still flying.
I don't think any coach would ever say this, but do you think in the back of some coaches' minds they want to avoid being the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA
They probably
tournament?
do. They probably do. I think, Wake will be really interesting this year. Not to prolong this pod, but I mean, I think when you look at Wake overall, Chase Burns, if you've been watching, who TCU, by the way, almost had, as you're well aware of.
We're well aware.
He had like 23 strikeouts and I think it was like 12 shutout innings and inter squad scrimmages over the last 2 weeks. So he's obviously taken a step forward under Corey Mascara, their heralded pitching coach. They've got Josh Hartle, they got Michael Massey. Offensively, they lost some, but they've got Nick Kurtz and guys like that back. So, Wake Forest checks every single box, and they also check the box of a team that fell just short last year and has something to prove. But to be the number 1 team, to be the team that everybody wants to beat, that can be difficult, and frankly, it can be tiring because it's like every single time you go out there, you're getting someone's absolute best, and that can be tough to handle, especially as you get to the very end of the season.
Man, they play Duke in early March too. That's gonna be
Duke's gonna be really good. I mean, Jonathan Santucci could very well be, one of the top 5 pitchers in college baseball. They're, Duke's Friday night guys. So, I'll be very interested to see how their season goes. Last year they were hunting. This year they're going to be hunted. It's a little different.
Well, Kendall, you have about 3 days to get any sort of rest, and then it's time.
Well, that's okay. I noticed JD, you were up there kind of getting ready for the tailgates this weekend.
Oh, I can't wait.
So some home series coming up for the Frogs. We have UCLA next weekend, and not this weekend, but the next one. Oklahoma, Tech, and Kansas State. So we sincerely hope to see you out at one of those, Kendall.
Absolutely. I'll definitely be up there, and maybe one of you guys can do a trial run and be my butler for the day. Is that cool?
Yeah, Garrett. Ready?
Tell you what, if you show up to the last game, you can join us and we'll serve you.
Yeah, that's West Virginia. That's the that'll probably decide the Big 12 championship, right? Or the Big 12 conference regular season that Saturday against West Virginia.
There you go. Get my butler service while I'm at it.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend. Thanks for your time.
You got it. Good luck to the Frogs this year, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, Kendall. Thanks.
Later.
Oh, damn. I was hoping